Hi, everyone. Welcome. Those on Facebook, and we're admitting folks into the Zoom room. Just give a little bit time here. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Just giving a minute here for other folks to join us, and then we'll get started with this week's presentation. So for those of you that know me, I'm Clementine Mini Bordeaux, and I'm participating this year in helping with Racing Magpies winter camps. And on behalf of the whole team, I'm just excited to welcome you all here this afternoon. So today we have Megan and John who are presenting on thinking about education and Tiospaye building. So Racing Magpie is a Lakota-centric arts and culture organization founded in 2015 here in Mini-Luzaha-Otumahe, here in Rapid City, to center the Lakota practice of being a good relative in everything that one does. Our work is focused on elevating and amplifying the ongoing work of community-based artists and culture bearers in the region. As we think about being a good relative, this program reimagines the Lakota winter camp model of problem solving and community building. And as we think about that in today's world, we examine the deeper cultural roots about the way Lakota people do things and how we interact with the universe around us. While these events are open to the public, right, people can join us virtually from across the globe. We always target Lakota community members as both presenters and attendees, really focusing on the Oceti-Sakowin communities. And just as plants and trees focus their energy on building strength and growing from the roots during the winter, our community will join to strengthen and grow together each year through sharing and learning. And I think especially as we are entering, our second year in the pandemic, I really appreciate this virtual space to be able to share and grow. Of course, we want to thank our sponsors, so of the Bush Foundation for their generous support of this program. And if you are want to find ways to support Racing Magpie, you can visit our website, make a donation. Also, COVID depending, you could stop by the building in Rapid City and visit there. Or of course, you can always support the artists and culture bearers that we share out and work with our community. So you can purchase earrings. I know Megan has an earring addiction such as myself, or you can buy artists or donate directly to the artists that we work with. So throughout the Zoom, if you have questions either in the Zoom room or on Facebook Live, I'll be monitoring the chats and the comments, and we'll be able to relay those questions to Megan and John. And so without further ado, I'm going to quickly introduce them and turn the presentation over. So we're joined by Dr. John Little. He's a historian, scholar, filmmaker, mentor. His presentations and research focus on Native student retention and success in higher education, decolonizing work in the university, cultural appropriation, Native themed mascots, Lakota and Dakota music, and the Native American Vietnam veteran community, looking at the fact that Native Americans served in the military at a higher per capita rate than any other ethnic group in the United States. And we're also joined by Megan, who is currently the Director of Native Student Services at the University of South Dakota. She has held positions in undergraduate admissions, college counseling, and student advising at the University of Pennsylvania, Questbridge, Santa Clara University, Albuquerque Academy, and the 7th Gen Summer Program. So I'm really excited for you all to join us, and I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Minnie. And yes, I do have an earring addiction. So if anybody else wants to have a conversation,
we're working through it. We're trying to get through it together.
And Racing Magpie is one of my favorite places to go and support artists. So we love and appreciate all of you. Thank you to Minnie and to Peter and to Mary. We really consider you a part of our Tiospaye and our family as well. So we're really grateful to all of you for supporting us And to our friends and family that are tuning in, and to people we're just meeting, we really appreciate you taking the time to be here today. And I'll introduce myself in Lakota. Michajiki Megan Redshirt Shawl, Kol Michajiki Chanko Ashtawi, Waziahanaha Hemataha Ma Lakota. And I'll let John introduce himself as well.
Hamidakepi, Chanteo Stena Be Choose Apido, Ishkan Chiankapi, John and Makapido, Damakodak, Homasichu, Mihunkake, King Kenneth Catherine, and Wichakiapi, Miate Yambos Date. So, hello, my relatives. I'm also really excited to be here today. My name is John Little, and I'm a member of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe. And just really excited to be here today again, too. With these winter camps are always really amazing to watch. There's always some really amazing guests on there. And so just thankful to be part of that community. And again, echo what Megan said about Racing Magpie, and their entire team is just really amazing. So we're going to be, I guess, talking a little bit about, as you can kind of see here, creating community. What does Tiospaye look like in higher education? So both of our roles are kind of focused on that. And this is kind of just a quick outline of what we're going to be talking a little bit about. Obviously, talking a little bit about our own personal experiences in higher education and kind of how we navigated those systems. But then thinking a little bit about that concept of Tiospaye in higher education, and then thinking a little bit about recruitment, retention, alumni relations, and then some of our current projects. And so we'll kind of break that down. And you can see our this is the USD, University of South Dakota logo that we're using for Native Student Services. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
We really wanted to sort of indigenize the coyote. For those of you that are joining us from other places, USD's mascot is coyotes, and this was actually done by a former community member, and it was actually published on a calendar that was something that had been published before my time even being director, and I absolutely loved it, and actually asked her mom, Donna Strapo, her name is Tanya, if Tanya would be okay with us using this coyote. And so all of even those connections of the logo being created generations before is something that's really special to us, and we use it on all of our publications. Any event we do, we put this coyote on.
So again, like I said, obviously we're all of us community members, we're all informed kind of by our experiences. And so you can see my background, my academic background. I attended South Dakota State University, and all of my degrees are in history. And then I also attended USD, and then attended the University of Minnesota. And each of those places, I had very, very different experiences and kind of what it looked like to be a Native person on campus and to be seen or not to be seen. So when I was at SDSU, there were not a lot of Native students there. That they currently have a really beautiful center there. They have some really amazing initiatives. Those did not exist when I was there. And so seeing them kind of build those programs has been really inspiring just to watch and see. But it's changed a lot. I felt very kind of unseen at a lot of times at SDSU. USD kind of has a little bit longer history of like serving Native students, but again, sometimes kind of felt unseen there. And like a lot of things have changed since I've been a student there over the last 10 years. And then again, going to the University of Minnesota and seeing a lot of different things. They have a lot of different Native people on that campus, and they also have a really rich kind of history of different programming and Native studies and things like that. And so seeing a little bit about those things, but then also kind of my experiences at each of those entities, I was actually usually working. And so focusing on either serving students at the Boys and Girls Club, from kind of K to 8th grade, working with a lot of different Native students and kind of recruiting students to come attend the club. But then also just working at a lot of different areas at USD, but also Minnesota, and kind of supporting Native students and students of color in a lot of different capacities. And so those are kind of where a lot of those things are coming from me, for me personally. And really, like I said, my career is kind of focused on creating better representation for Native students. And I think that goes forth like all of my things. So my background is a little bit telling history, writing histories about Native Vietnam veterans or different things, but also recruitment, and then also filmmaking. And all of these things I think seem like they're not connected, but they all are really connected in ways of just trying to make better representation for Native people. So trying to recruit more Native people into college, to telling better stories, to telling more accurate stories, and also challenging stereotypes. And so those are a lot of different things that I'm kind of thinking about for my own personal work and my experiences, throughout higher education.
For me, I think it's really important for me to not only acknowledge the programs that I was a part of, but also that I actually grew up in higher education. So I have two parents who have had careers in higher ed, working in undergraduate admissions and teaching. My father has worked in undergraduate admissions. My mother teaches in the Lakota language and Native studies. And those were two sort of areas that I grew up in. I had an understanding of university systems that were very, very different than many of the students that we work with who are first generation to college. So it's always really, really important that I root the way that I'm approaching conversations with students in the experiences that I've had. I grew up understanding systems in a very, very different way. I was given access to information that many students that we have worked with in our careers have not been given. And so I'm always very, very mindful of the privilege that I occupy and the tremendous experiences that I had growing up in higher education. I attended the University of Pennsylvania and graduated in 2011 with my bachelor's in English with a focus in creative writing. So Racing Magpie is right at the center of everything that I care about. I believed at that time that I was going to go into journalism, and then absolutely fell in love with the field of higher ed. I started working in undergraduate admissions and worked in admissions for a few years, and then worked with test prep. So learning how to educate students about ACT and SAT prep. Worked for a nonprofit called QuestBridge, or the Quest Scholars Program, which provides essentially opportunities for low-income students to attend partnership schools for 4 years without debt, debt-free, which was also an amazing experience. And then I attended the Harvard Graduate School of Education for my master's in higher education. And I'm currently a PhD student at the University of Minnesota, looking at actually some of the systems that we're going to talk to you about today, specifically living learning communities. So much of my life and my experiences has been defined by the different phases of what higher education looks like, and specifically for Native students and Native communities. It's so critically important to ground what we talk about today in these experiences that we've had. We've had very supportive families in education. We both were given the opportunity really to focus on our studies and excel. And those are the types of frameworks that we, both of us, really want to pass on to the future generations of students that are learning and pursuing higher education as well.
Yeah, and so we thought this was a good photo for to kind of explain we're constantly running on the job in a storm. That's kind of what it feels like sometimes. This was actually one of our first weekends on campus this year, in which we were kind of decided to do a cookout for the students at the Native American Cultural Center, and it poured rain and thunderstormed, and so we actually had to stop and kind of move everything inside so we didn't get struck by lightning. But it was a fun, and I think this is a good metaphor for kind of explaining just we're constantly on the run for that. But yeah, my current position right now is actually the Director of Native Recruitment and Alumni Engagement at USD. And so that encompasses a lot of different things. And for a lot of different people, I think sometimes that doesn't seem like those two things fit together. They're kind of on the opposite ends of the spectrum. But at the same time, I think for me, they're really kind of in connection with each other. And so 50% of my role is really focusing on kind of helping the first year students who are coming to USD transition. And part of that, as Megan said, is a living learning community. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But the other 50% of my role is really just alumni engagement and kind of and really encouraging former alum, or I guess current alum, to just like stay engaged with USD in a lot of different capacities. And so we'll talk a little bit more and break that down a little bit more, but that's kind of my current role right now.
My current role at USD is I am the Director of Native Student Services. So I essentially lead the Native American Cultural Center, plan all of the day-to-day programming, take care of the physical space, and we'll elaborate a little bit more on what that day-to-day role looks like. But again, I love this photograph because I think it is actually such a metaphor for creating Tiospaye in higher education. John and I are trying to hold the umbrella for students while they're making meals, and really trying to figure out what it means to be successful, right, in higher education and on college campuses. So you have to bring joy into everything that you do, and we love the work that we do. So we thought this photo was a good representation of that too.
And if you haven't figured it out, we didn't say it, but we are married, by the way, I guess, just so people are aware of that too, so we don't start any rumors or gossip out there. But Yeah, just kind of thinking a little bit about, again, that concept of Tiospaye, and Megan will break that down a little bit more, but really one of the first things that we really want to recognize anywhere in higher education, I don't want it to sound like I'm just implying that the University of South Dakota is a settler colonial structure, but wanting to acknowledge that these structures were really not designed for Native people. Sometimes we talk a little bit about boarding schools and forced assimilation and different things like that. But the current kind of educational college university system was not designed for Native people in mind. And so I think that's really important, just to recognize USD as a space that has sometimes been violent towards Native people, not just USD, but any institution in the United States. They've there's been a lot of different things we could go down on that, but just recognizing that the difficulties of Native people surviving in these institutions, and Native people have survived and thrived and done really well. But just wanting to put that out there and recognize that, and then also recognize the fact that these institutions are built on Native land, oftentimes that was violently stolen from Native people. And so really wanting to recognize kind of that when you're thinking a little bit about higher education systems and Native people.
I think it's really important too, as we talk about sort of these roles around kinship and really representing the concept of your extended family or relations. I'm really lucky because I get to work with my partner, and I also get to work with my Dr. Delphine Redshirt, who teaches Lakota language at the University of South Dakota and at Stanford University as well. One of the things that she instilled in me and passed on to me is this concept of what the breakdown of kind of Tiospaye is. Ti is your home, and Oshpaye is this idea of being part of your home. And the roles that John and I occupy in working in higher education is the responsibility that when we are welcoming a Native student to campus, we become a part of their Tiospaye. So many of us that have sent students to college or who have attended college ourselves understand that it means a tremendous amount to have somebody there to meet you on the other side, especially if you're going far away from home. Even if you're not going far away from home, you're going in the same town, to feel like there are adults in your life who care for you, who care about your day-to-day, who are interested in the things that you're interested in, and ultimately who may have answers about what is possible at the university, what resources they are. So we take the concept of Tiospaye in our work very seriously. This idea that when a community is entrusting their students to us, we're going to do our best to try to create a network of support for them so that they feel like they're trusted, right? They feel like we're an institution that cares about the success of their students, that then builds into community. And something that I'm really interested in kind of in my own research and in looking at retention for students specifically, which is what I'm sort of now moving into before being on the recruitment side and choosing college side. Tinto's theory of student departure is really this idea that the more the students feel integrated into a college campus or a space, the more likely that they're going to stay and graduate. This really extends across all students that are choosing higher education as a pursuit. But I think that for our communities, specifically for Native students, this is critically important. And so this idea of really welcoming them to campus, who is your family, who's going to take care of you, who's going to feed you, who will meet you when you come and do 4, 5, 6, 7 years that can be tremendously difficult, as John described. So really in our roles, this idea of connecting to others, not just to the resources that are on campus and mentors, faculty and staff who will be supportive, but also in other peers. So many of us, when we go into social situations, it is really hard to put yourself out there, especially if you can remember back to being sort of the traditional college age, right, of 18, 19 years old. What did that feel like to go and have to make a whole new set of friends? After high school, you have already created your friend network, you felt like you already did that, and then you go to a campus, you don't know anybody. So that importance of really connecting them not only to people like us who want to support them, but also their peers. And then that idea of resources, right? So how do I print? Where do I pick up my student ID? How do I do meal swipes? Who do I talk to if I have to do a change in my housing, right? If I want a new roommate, all of these kinds of questions that students come with or may not even know the answer to. One that we see a lot often is financial aid, right? Filling out their financial aid forms. How do you afford college? How do you make it affordable? So again, we really try to create this network of support and this network of care ultimately. So this concept of Tiospaye in higher education is that it is our responsibility as good relatives to our students to try to make this network available to them. And it may not always be, right, that we're the two people that they're connecting with, but if they find a point of connection on campus, or they find a student group that they feel they're connected to, they find a space on campus that they feel like is home, right? That is going to really connect to that idea of the theory of student departure, right? That they feel like they're integrated and a part of campus. And that's what it means to be a part of community, which is critically important to the work that both of us do.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we have had to really kind of rethink, and we're rethinking a lot of all of this stuff, but I think it's just actually rethinking what recruitment looks like. And I know Sochi Chadian is actually on this call too, and he is actually like the native recruitment specialist. He's been kind of the one that's will be going out and has been going out and working with a lot of native students that are applying for USD. And so I think one of the things that has been really important for us is I'm a big networker, and I think that's part of Tiospaye, part of creating kinship is oftentimes we think about that as native people. We think about that we're only doing kinship building with other native people. But it's really important to survive, especially in a place like USD or any college institution that's like, again, a settler colonial institution. We have to partner with non-native people. We have to partner with offices that maybe are not thinking about native people across campus. And so I think that's been really important for us in building a network across campus. And so we've partnered and worked really hard to develop relationships with admissions. So we're kind of now to the point where anytime there's native students visiting, we get a phone call, or we get an email, and we can schedule and get them to the Native Center. And that hasn't always been historically done. They're getting the tour of campus and they're seeing some of the things, but often maybe not coming to the Native Center, which is really a really important piece for showing a Native student on their visits to campus. But again, also redeveloping recruitment plans. I didn't know a lot about recruitment plans. I've been fortunate with a lot of my roles. I've always been able to kind of just naturally go to native communities. And oftentimes networks and admissions are divided up into territories. I had no idea. I had to learn all of these things, and thinking a little bit about a territory. Someone has like West River, East River, but thinking about what recruiting native students looks like, they're going to come in multiple territories. There's students in Minnesota, there's students in Nebraska, like native communities that are really close to us. And so we have to kind of redevelop and think about what that recruitment plan looks like. How can we visit all 9 tribal nations in South Dakota? How can we get to Winnebago and the Omaha nations south of us? How can we get to the Dakota communities in Minnesota? And so we have to really think about what that looks like and redeveloping an entire recruitment plan. Can we go to events like Alumni? Yes, absolutely. We need to be going to events like that. And so really for us, it's been kind of just using and seeing what systems are in place, but then also just redeveloping and kind of changing those ideas so that we can better recruit native students across the state of South Dakota. Again, bringing students to campus. So really kind of coordinating with a lot of different people. There's a lot of different departments on this campus. Sometimes they're not working with admissions, or they're working with other things, but making sure that we're connected to pretty much every department on campus. So if they're bringing a native student to campus, we can make sure that we get them to the center, or we can connect them with any native faculty and staff that have really related research and different things like that. And so again, just part of that networking and kinship building across campus. And then personalizing their experiences. I think the nice part is we both have a lot of connections across the state. So I try to relate to the students in a lot of different ways when they're coming. If I can tell some student from Rosebud, I try to have someone from Rosebud come and actually talk to them so that they can relate to that person a lot. But also trying to build their communities and experiences like based on things that are important to them on USD. I think so many times when students come to campus, across any campus, it's like we got to show them the wellness center. We want to show them all our really fancy things across campus, but sometimes we're ignoring the academic component of it. And so wanting to stress that to them when they're coming or visiting campus. And then again, partnering with orgs and communities and really tapping into the USD network that we have too. USD does a ton of different summer programming for different things. The Oscar Howe Summer Art Institute, they're bringing 15 or 16 native students from across the nation. And so making sure that we're getting there and we're going to those events and connecting with those students in a lot of different ways, whether it's having an hour program at the NAC, the Native Center on campus, or doing different things like that. And so just tapping into as many resources as possible with that. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
I think just highlighting that one of the things that I think has been really powerful that John mentioned, right, is really connecting students to us understanding where they're coming from and understanding their communities. And it's our responsibility as professionals to do that work, right, so that they feel welcome to campus. And I'll just highlight that this photograph is from Dr. Redshirt's presentation on campus about Lakota language. So really connecting students to the opportunities that they have to come and visit campus and see programs that they're interested in or resources that they're interested in is something that we try really hard to do as well.
And this is also actually our native living learning community that I think we're actually talking about right now. So that works perfectly. So that is an example that we're talking about. It's called the Wiyushka BTP Native Living Learning Community. And that actually was a name that was given to us by Dr. Redshirt, which roughly translates to where they're living contently. And so it's a really powerful thing. We kind of like to joke about it. I think we sent an email on Wednesday. Megan and I were kind of just bouncing ideas on how to I had no idea how to build a living learning community. I didn't really know any of those logistical aspects, but I said that would be really cool. And we started kind of drafting plans. We're like, let's do it like a year and a half so we can really get a good plan. We emailed housing to see if we could start a conversation, and they said, get a proposal in by Friday and you can have it up for next year. And so that was, I think, one of those things where we were sprinting to figure out what this looks like, how to build it and do different things like that. We were fortunate enough to win a $5,000 like women in philanthropy grant at USD. And so that really helped support build that, helped us like create a ton of different programming in its first semester, which was this last fall. And we're starting our second semester this year. But again, it's a living learning community designed for Native students. Most of the students are on Mickelson's second floor, which is in the North Complex at USD. And again, like we're kind of learning this. Ideally, you want all of the students like on one floor, but as we're building it this year and last year, we kind of had to, students are kind of scattered a little bit in the dorms, but the idea is kind of just building community events and kind of creating a Tiospaye for students to attend those events. And so it's been a really effective recruitment tool this year that we're not sprinting as much. We've slowed to a jog. And so we're kind of able to kind of build the community. So I think we have 5 or 6 students already signed up that are seniors right now that are going to be freshmen. And so the more that we can do this, the better we're going to get at it. Our goal is eventually to have an entire native floor. I think 72 spots is what that looks like. And so, we're building that. But the big focus for this has actually been developing weekly programming. And so with that $5,000 grant, we were able to bring speakers every week for that. And I think we were really strategic in what we are doing with that. Again, kind of building that Tiospaye. So we divided them basically into different weeks. And each week, I think we had 12 programs total. We had 3 or 4 movie nights. So we tried to screen and do different films that are made by Native people that are kind of going to empower them to think about that. Some of them are funny. We screened a couple Taika Waititi films, but getting them to just think about what that looks like, a Native person making a film. And then we brought in 3 or 4 different speakers, including a couple alumni. Joe Williams was one of those. And so really wanting to get them to talk about their experiences. So Joe came and talked a lot about how he struggled a lot at USD and different things like that. And so I want them to hear those things. And then the other ones that we divided into is actually we have dinner with Native faculty on campus. And I think that's really important for them to actually connect. There's not many times where they're going to connect with Native faculty or just figuring out ways that we can be strategic with that. So those faculty come in and then they also talk about their experiences. And the thing that we had in common, I think we had 6 or 7 speakers come in total, if you include the faculty, and they all talked about graduating from USD, and none of them graduated in the 4 or 5 years. And so I think it was really powerful for students to realize that like it's a journey. It can, and graduating from college can take a lot of different directions. You may struggle, you may have to stop out for a little bit, but it's still easy to keep continuing to go. Whether it takes 4 years, whether that's ideal, or 5 years. But sometimes there's a lot of different journeys and sometimes things happen. And so I think that was really important for us to show them what that looks like. And so I think that was kind of like part of the key development thing. But then the other thing we do, each of these, we're serving food at them. And so I think that's the biggest thing in building Tiospaye or kinship is you're offering them food, you're giving them something to eat. We're really focusing on trying to bring in food from outside of campus and again, make that community bigger for them. So I know so many times, if you're at USD, you're broke, or if you're in college, you don't have a lot of money to buy outside food. And so really being strategic and like partnering with outside organizations or outside restaurants to bring in food for that as well. So do you have anything to add on that?
The weekly programming has been really fun. Our students consistently have shown up for weekly programming, and it's just been a really fun semester and a month that we've had with them. So
yeah, I think we've had, so we started off with 18 students, and then at the semester we finished with 14 at the end of the semester. And so I think it's like 78%. We had a couple students that stopped out, one transferred. And so I think it's, it's not going to ever be perfect. I would love to be 100% retention rate, but it's something that we're continuously building. And hopefully I think the attendance for those was about 90%. And so I think just continuing to build that programming as we go.
So a lot of the things that I focus on in my day-to-day work is really rethinking concept of retention. So once we have the students, we've recruited them to USD's campus, what are we doing to keep them there or to keep them feeling like they're successful? It's really, really important to remember that even though they may not regularly be coming to the Native American Cultural Center or regularly coming to our programming, or we may not have regular contact with them, that there are many different people on campus that they could be having that regular contact with, such as our Native Student Advisor, Dr. Carol Voss Ward, or our Director of Tribal Relations, Damon Leadercharge, right? These are people that they've connected to alongside many other faculty and staff on campus. How are we making those networks stronger for them, those family members stronger for them? So understanding that students have many opportunities to feel connected beyond just the programming that we do through the Living Learning community or through the NAC. How do we create a network of potential connections for them? And I think that's the way that life is, right? You're going to be friends with some people, you're going to instantly connect to others. And so the more people that our students are able to meet, the more people that our students are able to feel connected to, that's what's rooted in Tiospaye, right? Who is your Tiospaye? Who is your kinship network on campus? And one of the things that I think is really important for both of us in the work that we do is that our responsibility really is grounded in positive affirmation. We are not the people on campus that are there to reprimand our students for missing class or needing to go home for an emergency or spending their money on something that they shouldn't have spent their money on, right? We are the people that are supposed to be there to help them pick themselves back up when difficult things happen, when they have a death in the family, when they have to stop out, when they decide that USD isn't the right fit for them and they want to go somewhere else, when they're facing a financial aid issue. We ultimately take our roles as the people on campus that are going to uplift them. And again, that goes back to, right, the experiences that I had in higher education. I had faculty and staff on campus who said, no, you know what, you're having a hard week. It's really difficult right now, but you can do this, right? Affirming them that walking across that graduation stage, if that's the path that they've set out for themselves, is deeply rewarding, right? It's one of the most life-changing experiences that a person can have. Or deciding and picking a different path for yourself, right? Becoming a parent while you're a student, or deciding that you need to go into the military or go into a different role or take time for yourself, right? That is the positive affirmation that we want to set out for students, that if it's not USD, we still have your back. If it is USD, we have your back, right? How are we going to continue to make you be a successful person in whatever path you approach? And so I really believe that positivity and bringing light to students' lives as much as we can, even when we're having hard days ourselves, right? Practicing self-care for ourselves is so, so important because students need that. They need people to uplift them and make them feel like anything is possible for them, anything that they've dreamt they can make happen. One of the spaces that we are very lucky to be able to do that at USD is the Native American Cultural Center, which is on campus. It has been in its current location since 1988, has had tremendous leaders come through its doors, tremendous programming and tremendous students. And I'm very, very lucky to be able to lead this space day to day. John and I wanted to highlight this photograph, these two photographs, because this is a brand new mural that came into our space this year that actually, much like the Racing Magpie family, celebrates artists. So these are actually all of the artists, the names that are written on the wall are all of the artists that have taught at the Oscar Howe Summer Art Institute. The two students who did this were Oscar Howe Fellows in the fall, so Lacey McLuth and Jocelyn Estes. And just really being able to bring art into the space, positive energy, people that have made positive contributions to students' lives. Again, this idea of kinship and continuing to have those connections, those threads of people who are still doing the work and still producing, people who have left, departed and gone on to the spirit world, right? They're still a part of the space and still a part of the experience of USD. We're very lucky at the NAC that we have a kitchen, we have couches, we have study spaces. One of the highlights for students is that we have free printing, right? It's those little tiny things that can make a big difference in a student's life. So really it's our job to advocate for that and to really create a space that feels like home for them. So I am the director, my formal title again is Director of Native Student Services. So I'm actually housed within the Department of Student Services. And one of the things that I really love about being a part of that network specifically is that there are many different offices on campus that are housed underneath Student Services that I've been able to connect with and be connected to. Housing, disability services, ROTC, right? These are different offices that we work with on a regular basis who our students have complex experiences, right? They might be Native students, but there are other parts of their identity that are equally or more important to them when they're undergraduates. And so the more that we can build networks with those spaces that support them in different ways, the more successful our students are going to be. And this idea of really applying traditional methods of kinship into higher education, as John said before, right? Hosting a meal together, just being able to sit and relax, hosting student groups, right? That are focused on different areas of their experience. And really honoring every student experience individually. I think one of the things that I've been really sort of reflective on in this work, and one of the things that John and I talk about often is that our students just want somebody to listen to them. They just really want somebody to not feel like there's any judgment or that they can just vent, right? Judgment-free zone. I have a banner in my office that says, you can cry here, because I think so often there's so much pressure, even when our students leave their communities, right? And they go to college, there's so much pressure coming. There can be so much pressure coming from home or from outside forces or things that are both positive and negative on them. And ultimately, our students just want somebody to say, it's okay, I hear you. I may not necessarily understand everything that you're experiencing. For example, sometimes I'm talking to students that are in the sciences. I was an English major. I don't always know, right, what it is specifically that they're talking about, but to be able to positively affirm them and just listen to them is so critically important for each of them in their own experiences. And then really just providing those cultural, social, and academic opportunities, providing workshops and opportunities for engagement. It's really important too to highlight that we have more than 24 tribal nations on our campus. So beyond just the nine tribal nations here in the state of South Dakota and surrounding states, we have community members that are from Oklahoma, Wyoming, Montana, other states, right? And so being able to be open to the idea that even though we're grounded in Oceti Shokonwe thought and idea and principle, and our students are really respectful of that, we do have many other tribal nations that are also represented on campus, not just as undergraduates, but graduate students as well is really, really important for us.
I actually want to go back a couple. So I keep forgetting to acknowledge kind of the photos as well too. So this is actually our students. So we're fortunate we have 10 Native students who are athletes, I guess Division I athletes. And this is actually Aspen Williston, who plays on the USD women's basketball team, and a bunch of students. I mean, they actually go to just about every one of her games to support her. And so, and then again, Megan talked about Lacey and Jesselyn. And then this is also an event in which we actually hosted the med students. I think there were 4 med students that came to that event and kind of talked a little bit about what it's like to get into med school. And so just trying to connect them with anything and everything that we possibly can. There were students that were not interested. I think some of them came for the free food, but at the same time, however we can create that Tiospaye, and some of them were really interested in med school. And so I think it's kind of cool to kind of create that different programming like that. And then again, this is before I forget, this is a photo of Damon Leader Charge and I, who's our director of tribal relations. But this is also something we've been working on, I guess, about 50% of my role too, is alumni relations. And that's kind of a new forte for me, thinking about a lot of different things, but really wanting to think about what alumni means. For most people, that means that they've graduated from their institution, and that's how most institutions measure that. And so for us, we've been kind of redefining that and thinking a little bit about that. again, USD has a long legacy of different programs that have been on campus for over 50 years. Upward Bound is one of those. And so thinking about a student that maybe attended Upward Bound in 1974, that was their only interaction with USD. Well, we consider that someone who's an alumni of USD. And so really wanting to kind of restructure and rebuild that network. And so I think our term is anyone who's ever basically attended USD at any point in time, whether they were here for a week and decided to transfer, decided to stop out, or whether they were here for, you know, multiple successful graduations. And so I think we really want to kind of change how we're measuring success. Success, like Megan was saying earlier, can look like a happy, like healthy baby. So we're kind of trying to want to think about what that looks like, especially for Native people, and especially for building that community. There's so many people that maybe struggled and stopped out after 2 years. And I think we have to consider them part of that Tiospaye, part of that alumni relations, because they need to be heard and like felt. And I think sometimes they can come back too. And so I think that's been an important factor for us, is like looking and thinking about what alumni relations can look like. Again, it's the key component of it is continuing connection after graduation, or again, after attendance, you know, so wanting to kind of continue those relationships. Sometimes there's a lot of shame, you know, if someone fails all their classes and then stops out, that's not fun. You know, there's a lot of shame there, and wanting to make sure that they still feel like they're a part of that family, regardless of how their interaction at USD happened. But also wanting to recognize that USD has not always been a great place for Native people. And so wanting to kind of factor that into the equation as well too. But one of the big things that we've been working on doing is hosting events, and then also alumni to campus. And so this is actually an event. This photo was actually taken at Lakota Nation's Invitational. In December, we hosted an alumni event. We had about 71 mostly Native alumni come to that event. And so it was really powerful to see just the different generations. You know, there was a couple alumni that had graduated like 40 years ago. Then we had an alumni that graduated like 6 months before that. And so it was really powerful to kind of get them together. But then we also had students who were current USD students at the event. And so really getting them to network and talk to students and hear that history and that legacy was really, really, really powerful. And so I think that's kind of what we're continuing to do. Obviously we've had almost, I think we're supposed to be the 50th this year, but I think it's going to be the 48th like annual Wachipi on campus. And so making sure we're using this alumni network to make sure we're inviting alumni to come to the Wachipi or the alumni dinner or any programs we're doing on campus. And so it's been a really powerful part of that to see that. And then again, as I said earlier, like recruiting and alumni relations really work hand in hand. Sometimes I think those people kind of forget that. But if we have an alumni who has kids, and maybe they're interested in like having their kids come to USD as well too. So building those networks and working on developing those relationships together is a really, really important thing for us to do. And so it's been a really exciting thing that we've kind of done unofficially like over the last 40 or 50 years, but at the same time, we're kind of really going all in on it the last year and a half. And so it's been really fun to kind of build different programs for that as well too. And then I guess this is also kind of our non-USD related things too, is because thinking a little bit about some of our current projects. So this is actually something that Megan and I founded called the Tokahe Institute. And this logo was designed by Sadie Redwing, one of our colleagues. And it's we're kind of thinking a little bit about one of the things for us in South Dakota is obviously helping Native students get to USD or to college, to higher education. I would love for them to all to come to USD, but at the same time, we're really more so interested in getting Native students to higher education, wherever they're going to be happiest. And so I think that's been a really important thing for us. For me growing up, I tell Megan's heard this story 1,000 times, but for me growing up, Duke was a basketball team, Stanford was a football team. I didn't think about any of those institutions as like actual academic institutions that you could attend. And I was always really amazed when I'd see people that were going to Duke or going to Stanford. And like, I never even thought about that. And so for us, Tokahe is really about spreading awareness, getting Native students to think about, USD and other colleges in the state of South Dakota, but also thinking bigger than that sometimes too, thinking outside the state. Going a little bit further than like 50 miles or 100 miles or whatever. And so starting to think about all those opportunities that are out there beyond South Dakota, but then we're also working on developing those relationships with college recruiters and administrators to start thinking about South Dakota. So many times we're flyover country, or we're kind of considered a joke, I think, in admissions. And so we're really trying to get people to start thinking about South Dakota and recruiting not only Native students, but anyone from South Dakota. We have a lot of really amazing people that are coming here and like are totally capable of getting into Stanford and Duke or wherever they want to go, Harvard, any of those institutions. And so I think that's kind of what our our main project for Tokahe is actually a college fair that we're kind of working on. We developed this last year, and I think we had 42 colleges and universities attend. And so I think that's kind of what we're really hoping to do is like help Native students think outside of South Dakota, but also help institutions think about South Dakota. Do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, and I think this is something that in the work that both of us have done, we're just really passionate about exposing students to the possibility of a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, a technical degree. So it was powerful because we had a pretty wide range of institutions that attended. So 2-year technicals. We're working on hopefully developing more partnerships with our tribal colleges and universities as well, and celebrating the legacy and history of tribal colleges, being able to think about students and the possibilities that they have, and much like expanding their kinship network, right? Expanding the possibilities of their lives. And I think one of the things that's been really kind of fun about working in higher education is that there are so many different types of institutions. There are so many possibilities. I worked in college counseling. I shadowed in college counseling for 1 year. I'm by no means an expert in it, but one of the things that I absolutely loved about doing that work was just being able to give students choice and agency over their choices, agency and possibility over where they decide to go to college. And our students that decide that South Dakota is the right fit for them, that's an amazing experience, right? Students that decide that another institution outside of the state is the right fit for them, like that is amazing as well. We just want to be able to give them even that idea that they could go wherever it is that they're hopeful for. The idea behind the concept of Tokahe is, this idea of the first, right? Tokahe, the first person out of our creation stories. For so many of our students that we work with, they're first generation to college, or they might be the first in their family to pursue that particular area of study or that concentration. They might be the first student to go to that particular institution. So all their family went to the rival school and they decided to go somewhere else, right? There's so many of these different experiences of first, and the beauty of first, your first day of college, right? Your first day of graduate school, the first time that you make a friend. We all, for those of us that have gone through undergrad or gone through a college program, we remember those things, right? We remember the first time that we met our best friend in college, or we remember the first time that we failed an exam, right? We remember those things. It's carried in our bloodlines, in our hearts, right? In the work that we do. And I think that for both John and I, this concept of the first is even rooted in the work that we've done in all of the institutions that we've worked for. So we're really excited about the possibility of Tokahe. I think that there's so much tremendous conversation around possibility for Native students specifically. And South Dakota deserves to be a place that people take a hard look at, right? For when they're thinking about phenomenal Native students, our pipe dream, our long-term goal is that any institution in the country is going to think, oh, South Dakota, right? And the students in South Dakota, because we get to see that every single day. Every day that we're doing the work, we see phenomenal students from South Dakota, from Native nations. So what do we do to continue to build that reputation, right, out there in the world? We are the first people of this country. We have tremendous amount of knowledge. We have kinship networks that are strong, families that support our students. How do we continue to put that kind of energy out into the world, and really celebrate all of the richness of the possibilities of their first, right, in whatever capacity it is that they choose to be a part of. So this is our contact information. We'll just offer that if any of you have questions or are just interested in any of the things that we've talked about today, or even just generally higher education, I think for both of us, it's something that we love to talk about. We talk about it with each other all the time and love talking about it with our friends and colleagues. And so anything that you're considering in terms of supporting Native students through their undergraduate journeys, we're always happy to be of resource to you.
Definitely, yeah. I guess we want to open it up to any questions or conversation now.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, John. I thought that was really great. As someone who worked as an admin person in a college campus, I think every thing you said was really important about kinship building and trying to navigate a system that really doesn't want us to be kin. So I really, really appreciate that. We had a shout out on Facebook. Carrie Thrall, I hope I'm saying their first name correctly, said USD alumni here, go Yotes. So glad you're there and offering this webinar today. So you have some alum on Facebook giving you shout outs.
Awesome.
I had one suggestion. So also the South Dakota Governor's Gifted and Talented program used to be at USD. I don't know if it still is, but I went through I don't know how many years of that program. So I know there's a lot of Native students who went through Governor's Camp and stayed at USD campus for a couple weeks in July. So I just remember how hot it was there and humid, and I was like, take me back to the prairie. But I wonder if you could discuss, we don't have any questions coming in, but of course I have lots of questions. How you help students think about their experiences as something that you stated earlier, right? You take a positive approach to, talking with students. But I recall working, and I would often tell students, you need to share your journey, right? And sometimes that might be negative experiences or things that might not look the same as like a student who's from a dominant societal, home. And like, how do we encourage students or remind them, right, that their experiences have made them stronger, resilient, but that it's not a deficit, right? Like, what do some of those conversations look like?
Absolutely. Yeah, I love this question. And I think that one of the things that we talk about a lot with our I think all as Native people, no matter what field we're in, right? Oftentimes we're asked to share knowledge about working with Native students or working with Native communities. And so we get questions about this a lot. And, unfortunately, I think in so many ways, there have been these stereotypes that have followed Native people to higher education or whatever field it is. And I think that one of the things that I try to be really mindful of and try to remind people of is that you have to build trust with the students, and there is no reason that they need to trust you, first off, right? There's been a lot of systemic violence and experiences that they've had, right? That for some reason you as an administrator may remind them of somebody, right? Who was difficult. And I think that is something that I try to really hard to root in the conversations that I have with students, is that I'm never trying to pry them on what their experiences are. I try really hard to kind of have an open door policy and make sure that if they are sharing a story with me, it's very clear that it will stay, right? It will stay in the space, the safe space that we've created with each other. And that I always try to show, I don't know if gratitude is the right word, right? But saying like, I appreciate you sharing that, I appreciate you sharing that part of your story with me. And, but I think the most important part in those conversations is really ultimately being very committed to building that trust first and letting students come to you with the information that they want to share. And it might be a one-time interaction, right? Honor them is something that somebody said, honor their experiences. And it may only happen once, right? It may be that student comes to you and talks to you one time in their entire 4-year, 5-year, 6-year journey, but that you listened, right? And you were present with them in the moment when they were telling you about those experiences, and that you really are committed to continuing to support them in whatever capacity they define for themselves, ultimately giving students agency to tell those stories, and then also to tell us what they need after they've shared that information with us as well.
Thank you, Megan. There's your mom put a question in the chat. Would you both talk about your undergrad undergraduate experiences that may help current undergraduates, more specifically being Native students, and what you wish you had then that the current USD students have, what would have empowered you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that that's really influenced like how, not only how like I work with students, but how I teach. I always joke, besides my science classes, for the most part, I was an A/B student. Besides science and like math and all that, those were usually like the D's and the C's. I also got a C in my Native Studies class, and it was taught by someone who clearly didn't really interact or understand Native people. Probably got most of his knowledge from a book. It was a really outdated book. And it was an awful experience. And one of the reasons I did so poorly in that class is just because I quit going. And so I think that was kind of what drove me when I was older to like want to go to school, because I wanted to get the qualifications to be able to teach so that I could teach a class like that. And so I think for me that was a really difficult moment in my career, like, or as an undergrad, just to kind of see them talking about Native people, but not feel like they're actually talking about like real Native people, I guess, if that makes sense. And so I think that really influenced me to like drive me to where I'm at right now. And I think about that all the time whether I'm teaching or whether I'm working with students. I really wanted to be what I needed when I was an undergrad. And SDSU, like I said, has changed a lot immensely over the last few years. But there wasn't a lot of Native faculty that I saw. I mean, there might have been, but I didn't really interact with any Native faculty. And there's a lot more students than there are now than there were then. And so I think for me, it's been just trying to, that kind of has driven me to want to be that person at a school and an institution to like support students however I can. And I think so that's kind of where I'm at with the undergrad too.
I actually, we hosted a program this past week with two amazing Native grad students, Colette Bowman and R.L. Swallow. And we were all kind of in conversation about like our undergraduate experiences. And one of the things that I shared with the students is that when I went to Penn, I was one of 5 out of 5 that I knew, right? I know there were other Native students on campus, but 5 self-identifying Native students on a 20,000 person campus. And I remember really having been rooted in that culture and identity in my home growing up, that going, even with all of my knowledge of higher education, it was jarring, right? To really feel that sort of lack of presence that had been consistently part of my life was now only through a phone call, with Maina, or was only when I went home. And so even the students that I was connecting with on campus, they were all from different nations, right? So, and that I think so often for colleges and universities, well, we just put the Native students together and they'll be fine. They'll understand each other's experiences. Yes and no, right? The cultural nuances of like being put with different tribal nations. There's beauty in being able to find that connection or things that maybe are similar, but also for the experiences that now really seeing the students at USD, that connection to culture and to community is so critically important. And so that's something that in the experience that I had as an undergraduate, now working in higher ed, I'm really reflective of. The other side that I think is important for me to highlight too is just, I'm really grateful when I was an undergraduate to Black, Latinx, LGBTQ community members, that because I was part of such a small group of students, those student organizations and communities really became allies and were part of my kinship network. And I think about how much those communities of diversity, right, were important to me as an undergraduate. So, and how much I was listened to by people on campus who didn't necessarily understand my experience as an Indigenous person. And so I try really hard to pass on that listening to the students that we work with, because a lot of people listened to me when I was an undergraduate, and I'm always very grateful to the people that really helped me through it too.
Awesome. I know we're almost at time, but I had one more question. What is the importance of tribal relations? I think about Damon's position, right, in this outreach. And that's one thing I wish in my own undergraduate experience. I also was one of like 2 students at my undergraduate campus. And I wish someone would have told me to reach out beyond my college campus. to engage with the tribal communities where I was at. And I didn't know that, I grew up around Lakota people and that's all I knew. And I didn't know I could like make kin with other people or be a guest, right? Like show up and be like, hey, how can I like be present? So can you just highlight kind of why that's important?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think the most important thing, it sounds so simple too, is like, oh, we have a tribal relations person. But I think what that position specifically is doing is recognizing that USD has a relationship, like a nation to nation relationship with tribal nations. And so I think it's a really important piece. And Damon does a really amazing job of like going out into the communities and working with the tribal chairman and having conversations about them. Because we have to do the work on the ground too, but we also have to get out into those communities. And I think that's part of like what we've been doing with and thinking about recruitment too. So many times is the assumption is like, here, come to USD, like we want you to come here. But at the same time, we need to be out in those communities actually like introducing ourselves, whether it's a small event or whether it's a huge event, we should be at all sorts of events in those communities. And so I think to have someone actually like spearheading that and like doing a lot of that work of like interacting with those tribal communities and like showing them that respect is really key, important part of any relationship, whether it's a university or a college or whatever. That's just a respectful thing to do.
We love and appreciate Damon so much. And, I think that that higher education has defined itself as a sovereign, entity. And so really respecting that sovereignty with sovereign nations and understanding the role that those nations play. Higher education grants, from the tribal communities, those types of relationships that we develop with our K-12 teachers, tribal schools, all of those things are nation building. And we really appreciate Damon for the work that he does with that. And I saw that there was another question that came in from Facebook, which I love. What do upperclassmen play in retention? I cannot speak more highly about the upperclassmen and graduate students that we have that consistently come around our first year students and are setting an example for them that it's possible for them. I think even just their presence of physically being in the space, setting goals for themselves, saying hello, right? Sometimes I'll walk into a conversation and it'll be an upperclassman really, telling the first year, it's going to be, it's going to be okay. You're okay. Or this is what you should be doing to take care of yourself, sometimes kind of being auntie a little bit or uncle, right? With students. But that idea of setting examples, right? Even if they don't even realize that they're doing it, helping them with figuring out how to do the laundry in their dorm, right? Those small experiences, those small conversations that sometimes even us as being staff, we don't always have the answers to. And so upperclassmen, where to park on campus, right? Where you go to get a particular type of food, or giving our students a ride to Walmart, right? Those are the moments that we're not always there for them, but upperclassmen and graduate students can set a different example for our students. And we're deeply grateful because they come in with they have institutional knowledge that we don't have. So their roles are critically important to the work we do as well.
Yeah, and those are things that we're trying to tap into a little bit more, like intentionally. I think it's been unintentionally kind of happening just naturally. And so I think it's just like they can relate to stuff. I'd like to think I'm still a young person, but I'm getting older and not as much of not really a near peer anymore. And so I think that if they can come in and do that work, like Megan's saying, I mean, even just, I saw one of them talking about websites where you can find some like pretty much any article or different things like that. And so it's just like, there's just stuff that we have no idea about because we've been removed from it. I'm starting to think about how old I am, but just being removed from that is really difficult for us to understand a lot of those things. And so I think that's important to have those relationships if they can come in, and we're very strategic in that, in which we have, when we do every year, we do like a first year orientation, and we usually have the students actually show them, give them a tour of campus, and we'll set up a meeting with them to talk, and we usually leave because I want them to say whatever they think they need to say, and feel free to be able to say that. And so I think like that mentorship, we are strategic in it somewhat, but also working on building it even more in the future. It's been really influential in the LLC. We've had the living learning community. We've had some people who are not living in the dorms anymore ask if they can come to the events and participate in those events. And it's really good for them to show up and do that. But it's also kind of a mentorship that we weren't really planning on being developed, that they're kind of naturally developing it because they want to come and see the programs. They want free food too. But at the same time, it's like just seeing juniors and seniors and sophomores come to talk to the freshmen has been really impactful for that as well too.
Great question.
Awesome. Thank you. There was another affirmation from Facebook. Just thank you for this information and inspiring talk. I hope that your experiences, processes, and perspectives can be integrated into so many spaces in higher education and USD specifically, uplifting and prioritizing the students themselves and their experiences. The listening and supporting that you do is amazing. Thanks for being such great examples.
Well, Pila, thank you.
And then my nerdy ass is like, can you please publish this stuff so we can share it with other universities? You know, my campus is struggling with the same things. And we are trying to build, you know, one of our solutions was like maybe an LLC very similarly, but we're such a small percentage on such a large campus that it's really difficult. And then I think your conversation, I don't think people understand admissions and their regional stuff. Like if you could publish on that as well, I think thinking about Indian country, right, as like a territory, as opposed to like really breaking things up regionally would be really, really beneficial for lots and lots of admissions folks who are at really large universities who compete, right? This weird competition that then occurs in admissions. But anyway, we're at our time, and I really appreciate both of you sharing about your experiences at USD. I hope that more students are interested. I know it's hard to sometimes leave home, but at least they're headed towards another home on campus. So do you have any closing thoughts or remarks?
Just thank you.
Yeah,
thank
you.
Yeah. Thank you for the time. My dissertation will be about the living learning community that we've created. So I'm excited to do that research. But Minnie, you've given me some ideas now that we'll talk about.
Pre-order the book for 2018, maybe. So,
I'm like, please, we need this information. I think, and that's the struggle, right? I think a lot of this lands on us to do both, right? We're having to be students and build these communities. And I think that's often what happens at university campuses. So I really applaud you both for uplifting this community and navigating it on the run. So thank you so much for sharing. And for our Racing Magpie audience, we have some more awesome presentations coming up over the next couple of months. So you can check out our Facebook page or Racing Magpie's website. And I just again thank John and Megan for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.